This is a Renegade Media Network podcast. You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? A bonus episode is here for you. I wanted to get Tho Bishop, who is very, very proud of his home state of Florida at this moment. I suspect most of you guys realize why. They've been not among the best, they've been the best as far as all of this lockdown and mask business over the last year since this stuff started. Florida is without a doubt number one, and their governor has been pretty damn good on everything. My friend Thaddeus Russell, on the other hand, is in California, and I suspect most of you realize their governor and their tactics to fight this pandemic of sorts, they've been among the worst. And I wanted to get Thaddeus Russell's opinion and outlook and just experience. You know, the left likes to say lived experience. So I wanted to get these guys on here to discuss their experience. Thaddeus, like I said, in California, Tho Bishop over in Florida, and kind of give a comparison and see where things are at. And metaphorically and really physically, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm in Texas, and we're certainly better off than a lot of the states. But, you know, we weren't Florida. I'm a little jealous of that. And so I'll give kind of my opinions throughout on things here. And this really gets into a wonderful conversation on strategy and just kind of political thought and analysis on a lot of the events that are going on that have happened that we might be seeing here in the future. These guys, it was really cool to get them both on. I consider them both friends, and they had never met. And so I think you will gather from this that they clicked as far as this discussion goes, and really cool to get Thaddeus Russell on here and Tho Bishop and just discuss the COVID moment, the lockdowns, the masks, the cultures in their respective states, and the governors. And Trump, we discussed some presidential aspects of what went on as well. So without further ado, do I really need to introduce you? You all know Tho Bishop. He's been on the show multiple times. He is the co-host of Radio Rothbard, one of my favorite podcasts. And of course, one of the editors over at Mises.org, one of the greatest sites on the planet, Mises.org from the Mises Institute. My friend Thaddeus Russell not only runs the Renegade Media Network that this show is part of, he's been really helpful to me behind the scenes, a mentor of sorts. He, of course, is the proprietor of Renegade University and the Unregistered Podcast, a great political mind as well. And they're both here with us. Thaddeus Russell and Tho Bishop. I think this is a trio of unique names. Welcome to the show, both of you guys.
Buck, Thad, and Tho. We should definitely have our own show, the three of us.
Yes, yeah. And I keep thinking of Mike. I almost said Mike Tyson. See, Mike Tyson when I hear Tho, Thad. I don't know. It's the lisp or something. Most of my audience should very well know who both of you are because, well, you're well known. And Thad, I'm on your media network, and Tho, I've had you on multiple times. But just this is important here. Thad, where are you located?
You're already making me mad. I'm in California, and I've been here for more than a year. Yes, I have. I left the state once for one weekend to give a talk at the LP in Washington State. So that was 2 days. Otherwise, I've been in this fucking hellhole run by a retarded plutocrat governor for more than a year now. It's the longest and most strict lockdown in the United States, maybe in the world. I think it's the longest in the world because we locked down on March 25th last year and we're still in it. And we just advanced. Hey guys, we just advanced in our county to the orange tier, which is like halfway. We're like halfway out. Like
parts of this whole thing, and I tried to get, I interviewed Scott Horton early on, and I tried to get him to kind of go for this, but he didn't quite at the time. There's so many elements that remind me of the War on Terror when it first launched and got going, including those. Remember the threat level orange and different colors. So we know this is what we're supposed to think about today.
That's full War on Terror LARPing right there. I can respect that.
Yeah. Yes. And so my audience probably knows this too. You're quite proud of it. Where are you?
Yes, I'm here in the redneck Riviera of the free state of Florida, the Panhandle, Panama City Beach, Florida.
Give it up for Florida.
Yes.
Yes.
I saw my wife at a grits competition this past weekend. We had music out there. Full event.
Damn, I love you
great.
people.
Might be going to a dive bar later with no one in masks. I'm living the dream.
I love you people. I love you people. I used to think Florida would be the last place I would live. I was totally checking out like all the travel guides to Florida. I was like going through, where are the cool towns? What are the neighborhoods in Miami? Where do I live? How do I get there? What are flights? Can I'm so ready, man. I'm so ready. Sounds good.
When you do see, this is for Thad, when you do see clips of Florida people online doing stuff out and about, and you hear stuff like those going to probably discuss today, does it, what feeling do you get?
Me, I'm jubilant.
Do you get angry at your own?
Oh yeah. I mean, but I'm always, that doesn't change. I'm always 100% angry at the government. I mean, it's the California government. I mean, it's, I don't know if you guys know about it much, but it's like, it's like New York and New Jersey in that it's basically a mafia and has been for about 50 or 60 years, meaning there's a handful of, well, I said plutocrat, a handful of ultra wealthy families who are pre-tech, by the way. This is pre-tech money. Like this, a lot of this is oil money, by the way, like the Gettys. That's how Gavin Newsom is here because of oil money. A handful of families, mostly in San Francisco, based in San Francisco, and then the Democratic Party leadership have just had the state pretty much under control with a few minor, I mean, even the Republicans that they elect governor like Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he was a liberal, right? He's a progressive. So yeah, it's, since I was a kid, these jokers have been running the joint. And I don't know, what, did I answer your question? It's just...
and because, you know, depending on who sees these clips of people online in Florida having fun, which Tho is used to seeing on a daily basis. You know, it's funny. I see progressives just absolutely freaking out, especially just even seeing Tom Brady walk into a stadium. Oh my God, he didn't have a mask on. It's funny to see that. And the people that are actually smart, like yourself, trapped in California. I just was curious if you think like, I hate it here more. That looks like appealing to me. I would consider going to Florida, or they're lucky and it's not here.
See, I do this bizarre thing. I actually read the numbers, you know, I actually go and I look at the death rate, you know, which to me, and the hospitalization rate, which are the only thing that matter. And well, guess what? We're basically tied with Florida. So we're basically, California is for the death rate. We're basically tied with Florida, which has the oldest population in the fucking country. Right. Okay. I'm done arguing. This is over. We won. Let's go. Like, this is insane. And it's not just Florida. It's many, many different countries that didn't lock. The entire third world basically was unaffected by COVID. Do you think they had like strict health lockdown measures? No. I mean, yeah, you can get mad if Florida had high death rates, but who's at the top? New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. Those are the top three. And Rhode Island, I think, is the fourth one, all of which had like super draconian lockdowns. And then California and Florida right in the middle of the states, but radically different approaches. Florida's been open since when? October?
No, we've been open since even before that. I mean, the first phase of reopening started last May.
That's right.
And then it took a couple months for it to get full in. But I mean, for example, here in Panama City, you know, we had our businesses here. There's not a county in the state of Florida that relies more on the service industry than Bay County, just the way it makes up.
Right.
We had businesses here that had bigger years last year because of everyone flocking in than they did the year before during spring and summer months. Like as soon as the green light was given there to just open up a little bit. So yeah, it's been crazy. And the other interesting thing is that DeSantis has put a lot of pushback on local governments, even having their own enforcement mechanisms. Mm-hmm. And like, there's some libertarian arguments there about, you know, why that's not a good thing. But I mean, that's a whole other aspect to it. where there's even significant legal challenges again to those emergency sort of orders at the municipal level, where there's been so many issues in other states that have been nominally opened up. So again, it's been a very aggressive approach.
Yeah, I mean, we have many counties here that are very red, very Trump. And those have been in rebellion against the lockdown since the jump, pretty much since last summer, like open rebellion, like basically, fuck you. Here's a video of my restaurant and I'm allowing people in with no masks and fuck you again. You know, I mean, like going off. Shout out to Shasta County in particular, which was the epicenter of this. Redding, that's the city there. I mean, a lot of business owners were just like not having it from the beginning. And of course, see, here's the thing. The media, of course, calls them a bunch of ignorant rednecks. Okay. Unfortunately, at many of these rallies, they invite a bunch of ignorant rednecks who bring in a bunch of other shit that I don't want anything to do with, like the Confederacy. Why is this here? You know, a Trump flag. I mean, it's fine. I don't care. But like, don't bring the Trump flag. Let's try to have a coalition. Like, it's like they don't want to have a coalition because there are people who are liberals and leftists who are with us on this stuff. There's a significant number. A lot of them are very quiet about it. And the last thing they want, the thing they're most afraid of, is being associated in any way, shape, or form with anybody who looks anything like a Republican. Right? Because that represents, as Shelby Steele said, very brilliant analysis, I thought. It represents the old America, the America like before Martin Luther King, right? Before America was redeemed. That's what Donald Trump's all about for liberals. He's like the old America we're embarrassed by, right? So to look or sound anything like that in any way, you're socially dead. It's social death. So when you have a rally against a mandate, a lockdown mandate, or something like that, guys, please leave the Confederate and Trump flags home. And then we might actually get out of this damn thing. Anyway.
It's a lot more effective. It can kind of blend in. It's a lot more subversive that way.
Yeah. I mean, what we're going to have next is like Trump flags, Confederate flags, and then like hammer and sickle flags. Cause you know, it's going to be only the super crazy radical fringe people who are anyway. Yeah, it's a problem. But anyway, so we've had resistance, like you were talking about in Florida, how there's sort of the resistance in the other direction, right? There's municipalities that actually are more strict than DeSantis is. Here it's the other way around. Newsom, to my knowledge, he's never cracked down. The cops, as far as I know, have never arrested anyone in California for violation of anything having to do with this. I could be wrong, but it certainly has not been widespread. I know that, which is interesting, you know? And now, of course, we have more than 2 million people who have signed the recall petition. Mm-hmm. So his ass is definitely going to be facing that in the election. I have not voted since 1984.
This is exactly what I was going to ask you. Keep going.
I have not voted since 1984. I voted for Walter Mondale. Okay, don't hold it against me. Mm-hmm. That's the last time I voted for any human being. I still am not going to vote for anybody, but if they ever give me a chance to vote against a politician, I'll do it, no matter who it is. No matter who it is. That's what all, like, anybody with any anarchist anything in them should anytime there's a recall, it doesn't matter who the politician is, vote for it. Pretty much, I think.
So is
certainly this time.
Is this how it's going to work? Is the ballot going to say, should we recall Gavin Newsom? Yes, no?
Yeah, as I understand it, yeah. You know, we've done this before. Gray Davis was recalled.
I remember that. He had the rolling blackout stuff back then.
Right. I had been long gone. I was living in New York City then, so I don't really know much about that. I think that was in the 90s or something. But yeah, no, this is we hate this fucker, and it's many reasons, and it is a coalition here. There's some wording in the recall petition that I don't like. That is not my politics. Some of it's very left-wing, though. Some of it's very right-wing. It's definitely cross-party, cross-partisan. And the guy was elected because he's friends with Gordon Getty of the Getty oil fortune. That's it. Like, they adopted him. The Gettys adopted him, basically, when he was a kid and gave him tons of money and established his businesses and paid for all of his political campaigns and have supported him ever since. and you know, he looks the part and he plays the part well, and he's sort of innocuous seeming, you know, and so they've been betting on him to be president for about 20 years now, and he's not going to be president. He's not. Sorry, Gavin. You might win the recall election, but you're not going to be president, pretty boy.
No.
Sorry, buddy. That's over, bud. Thank God.
Speaking of that, though, there's rumblings about your governor at some point running for president. I suspect you might want to keep him where he's at.
Yeah.
What's the future look like for that in your mind?
No, I think that he's definitely being promoted right now as, you know, the figurehead of the future of a post-Trump Republican Party. And the problem is, I think he's always had that sort of ambition to him. I mean, he's an Ivy League guy by nature. But what's interesting is that, you know, kind of in contrast to, you know, Gavin Newsom's origin story there, I mean, DeSantis was relatively an outsider within Florida politics prior to 2018. I mean, the only reason DeSantis is governor is because of Donald Trump. I mean, 3 Trump tweets took out a guy who spent his entire adult life, Adam Putnam, trying to run for governor. And that's one of the great legacy aspects of Trump is those 3 tweets right there. Because, I mean, one of the things that's interesting, I mean, you talked about how, you know, there's no police, you know, there hasn't been over-the-top police enforcement of people in California, whereas in Texas, for example, you know, a nominally red state, a state that I think is a lot, you know, coasting off of its legacy of being the Lone Star Republic, right? I mean, you had people, business owners, that were brought before judges because they were rejecting it. You know, Shelley Luther, I think, ran for state senate after she was arrested by Texas authorities, put before a judge. The judge tried to make her, you know, beg for forgiveness because she dared try to open up her business. She said no. And there's a lot of Republican establishment pushing back against that. And I think that's one of the really interesting narratives here is that, you know, it's easy to contrast Florida versus California. You know, again, I see a lot of California license plates over here right now, but really the divide between Florida in South Dakota as well. I mean, Kristi Noem's in hot water over the NCAA bill, whatever, but contrasting to other Republican legislatures, because a lot of other generic pre-Trump style Republicans, I mean, they were on the back end of this. I mean, I think Ohio still is pretty locked down. I mean, Texas took forever. And I think that's one of the really interesting things, you know, does the DeSantis momentum, other politicians with their own ambitions, seeing how he's being rewarded by the base, does that encourage more bold state level action? Because that's what I'd like to see. You didn't see it in the Obama years. South Carolina, was afraid to pass a gun nullification bill in 2010. So hopefully that pays off in a way that could have a lot of significance going forward.
Well, I mean, now we have definite competition though between the states, which is that's all we should be asking for, right? Let's let them compete, just force them to compete, and then we'll see, right? That's all we want. And we're seeing people are moving to Florida in droves, and they're leaving California in droves to go to all sorts of places. But that's great. I mean, and then now Texas is now also competing with us directly, right? So let's go, buddy. And I saw the numbers today from Texas. Guess what? They're doing just fine.
Yeah, it went down. I believe it was 14% or something like that down. And so then of course, now I've seen the goalpost move, which keeps happening. Well, 2 weeks isn't exactly enough time, or now 3 weeks isn't we'll try again in a month. They just keep like, please have more deaths, please have more deaths. And it's not happening.
What it's kind of interesting is, I mean, you know, the Biden administration has kind of seemed to be not, you know, they'll make fun of Texas here and there. I mean, what was it? I think Biden called them Neanderthals or something like that. Yeah. But for the most part, it seems like Biden kind of understood that this is a good thing for his approval rating not to have these economies locked down. And yet today you had the CDC director out there saying that she's, you know, extremely terrified about a new surge coming on. So I'm interested to see if there ends up being a growing federal backlash to this going forward. You know, are they going to try to take the reins and try to take this backwards a little bit? As from a rhetorical standpoint, I was a little surprised by just how strongly worded it was, because I kind of thought that they're kind of appreciating what the vaccines were doing mixed with the economic benefits of reopening. But
I want to ask you, Thad. No one, I don't think, would confuse you with being a Trump lover by any means, but the way he handled this whole thing, letting it kind of go to the states essentially. Do you think the way he handled it was appropriate?
God, I don't see anything to blame him for. I mean, if there were mistakes, like he didn't pull the trigger fast enough on closing the border. I mean, he was being called a racist for closing the border by all the people who now want to close the border, and close the economy, close the society. No, I mean, leaving it to the states, I think, well, in general, that's what I'm for everything, for every question, so why not this? I mean, look, it comes down to, yeah, we could have done a full Chinese style lockdown, like a true, like, martial law, lock people in the houses. Although there's a debate about whether that really happened in China, by the way, but we could have done that. We could have called out the National Guard in every state and made sure no one left their house. And I guess it would have receded. The virus would have stopped, although arguments have been made by epidemiologists that all you're doing is delaying the spread of it by doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But, we could have done that, yeah. So that's the trade-off. We could also have, guess what? We could also have free healthcare for everybody, and we could have free education for everybody, and we could have a UBI for everyone, and we could have also, but we would be living with no freedom and probably a whole lot of poverty, but certainly no freedom. So again, it's like, that's the choice. But here, freedom turned out to be healthier. Florida is healthier than California, the oldest state with the same death rate. My God, that's what's so amazing about this. Numbers are in. But can I tell you just what it's like to live in this goddamn place and what it's been like?
Please do, yeah.
So, I live in the Bay Area, which is the epicenter of the epicenter. The Bay Area was the first lockdown, March 25th. The whole Bay Area locked down, the first place in the country to do that. I think like in a day or two, the rest of the country followed. But so since March 25th of last year, we've been in lockdown. The mask compliance rate has been measured in San Francisco at 98%. And that's correct. San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland, and Marin County, which is where I hang out, which is kind of like, you don't see, yeah, it's always well over 90% of the people I see. And I'm talking about outdoors. I'm talking about, fellas, on hiking trails. I'm talking about at beaches. I'm talking about in redwood forests.
Oh.
I'm talking about on mountain bikes, road bikes, children's bikes, children themselves, 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds at playgrounds, playing baseball with masks on. It's loosened up slightly in the last couple of weeks, so maybe it's down to about 95% compliance. But if you go to Berkeley, where I grew up, which is like, it's the most left-wing town in the country and always has been my whole lifetime. It's damn near 100%. Homeless people are wearing masks in Berkeley. The fucking dogs are wearing masks in Berkeley, it seems. Everybody's wearing masks in Berkeley. And I drive through there and I yell out my window. I'm so frustrated. I'm like, you're the most educated population in the whole country, yet you don't seem to have read anything beyond fucking CNN. How is this possible? Like, we have a magnificent medical school here, one here and one at Stanford, and yet none of you seem to know anything about medicine. I don't know anything about medicine, but I know this. The masks don't work. It doesn't matter. The lockdowns don't work. It doesn't matter. There's this thing called policy invariance. It's a term invented by Jay Bhattacharya, who's been on the Tom Woods show many times. He's the hero, the great hero. You guys know about him, right? The epidemiologist at Stanford, one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. He's here too. Like, I'm like, Jay Bhattacharya is here, but no one's listening to him, and it's like, he came up with this idea of policy invariance. You look at all the countries and all the states and all their different responses to it, which are across the board, and you see the virus sort of doing whatever it wants. There's no correspondence. There's no correlation between policies and how the virus has behaved, between states, between countries. It's going to do what it wants to do. If you clamp down like California did, right? What did we get? We had low numbers for about 6 months, and then as soon as the winter hit, we spiked higher than anyone, pretty much. We had a massive spike in December. And so we ended up basically equaling out with places like Florida, who were free and happy and going to goddamn dive bars, without masks, like the evil grandma killer here.
Yeah, there's probably more people listening that are maybe not used to how California style is, but Florida is certainly the best. And so for the listeners who haven't experienced what you have over the last year, you told me before, my life didn't really change much. Talk about how your experience in Florida has been.
Now again, I'm a little bit unique because the Panhandle is culturally Southern in spite of being the north part of the state. And so here, the pushback was pretty strong from the get-go against masks and against a lot of this. There's something just instinctual about it. In fact, one of the local governments here pushed their own mask mandate, before DeSantis started acting against them. That sparked a lot of criticism here. So that was kind of that sort of natural reaction. But from here, again, I think as soon as they first started opening up, bars were still closed, but like restaurants could do it. And then all of a sudden, all the bars just started offering like a bag of chips with your drink. And so for the most part, even then, from the very beginning, there was a lot of loopholes built into the governor's executive orders and things like that. And the enforcement mechanisms here were very, very light from the start. What's interesting, though, is that Trump actually encouraged, like DeSantis was holding strong against any form of stay-at-home order until they talked to Trump directly. And that's I think it's kind of lost over the long course of things. Again, I think Trump, relative to most other executive leaders and governments out there, early on, remember, the alt-right, and I don't mean that in a Richard Spencer way, but like the alt media, right, early on were responding to those Chinese viral videos of people falling down, right? The big push early on was, oh, China is hiding this thing. If you look at Zero Hedge was writing articles, oh, the crematorium rates are going out of control. They're burning thousands of bodies a day. Tucker Carlson was going to Mar-a-Lago and trying to beg Trump to take it seriously. That was the early on period, and I think that was actually helped. That made Trump react very strongly early on, and then it kind of opened up over time. And I think one of the big advantages that I think gets lost when we talk about these other states is precisely the fact that DeSantis recognized the need to surround himself with Great Barrington style intellectuals to help make the academic case, along with the freedom stuff.
So I'm really curious about that. I don't know the history. So why did that happen? How did the governor of Florida decide to talk to the Great Barrington people?
And what did Tom Woods have to do with it?
Well,
did he?
Well, I don't think Tom had a direct response there, but it's in the case of Florida, think about like the political calculations here. Again, it's very different than South Dakota. Again, this is not taking anything away from Nikki from what the governor there did. That's she took the right stand from the beginning. She never lucked down. But it's a population up there of less than 1 million. Here, again, one of the oldest populations in the state of Florida. And my grandmother's, in her 90s, she hates taxes as any good Republican, as well as I can hope for, from a Republican of that era. But she was terrified to death because she was seeing nothing but mainstream media coverage nonstop. She was convinced that if we don't do something, we're going to have bodies stacking up outside of her condo in Miami. And so there was a big political calculation going into 2020. I think that's what sparked Trump to kind of get DeSantis to act early on, because they were seeing a free approach to it tank politically, because there's a lot of concern out there. And then DeSantis, when he recognized that he needed to economically open up, he knew he needed other kind of tools in his toolbox. And that's where he started bringing in people like Scott Atlas, and the other biologists from Stanford, and some of those, again, the Great Barrington Declaration folks. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm encouraged to see what DeSantis can do for the American right, broadly speaking, going forward. Because again, it was building that parallel intellectual atmosphere, rejecting the DC policy experts, which again, you still have a lot of red states, referring to like CDC guidelines, where Florida doesn't. And I think that's something that is a unique part of this that can really help prevent other things like this happening going forward.
I want to interject another quick anti-politician note here. So, I like many of us fell head over heels in love with Ron DeSantis, right? When I saw this happening. So I was like, hey, maybe this is the first politician I'll vote for since Walter Mondale. Well, like the next issue I found out about with him was that he wants the government to regulate the internet more. Right? I'm like, bye. Like, it's amazing. It's amazing. Like how you should never, ever merge your identity with any politician, even if it's this kindly old grandfather figure from someplace in Texas who talks about Mises a lot and says all. And even if Ron Paul had been president, in other words.
Okay, I was like, wait.
Every libertarian, and there's too much of this. I think among libertarians, too much treating the Ron Pauls of the world like family. never treat, and I have nothing bad to say about Ron Paul. I mean, I disagree with him on like 3 things, okay? Like out of 100, okay? But like, these people are not your family. They're not your friends. They're seeking state power, even if they're Ron Paul. Like, never merge your identity with them as if you're in their family. Ron DeSantis sucks, except for this one thing on which he's glorious. He's glorious on one thing, and the rest of he's fucking.
The big thing. It is the big issue, though.
Well,
I've got a Mama Paul cookbook, though. I mean, if that's not family, I just don't know what is.
I mean, would you guys vote for him for president because of this? And I mean, what do you think his foreign policy is? I don't even know, but I bet it's terrible.
I'll see to Tho on that one because
the foreign policy thing scares me a lot. I mean, he's paying lip service to it, but I don't trust it. I mean, that's my biggest concern there. But I will say this though: the single biggest difference between the quality of life that I've had this past year and that you've had this past year has been the fact that Ron DeSantis won the governorship with a little less than 33,000 votes. Because if we'd had Andrew Gillum, we would be New York.
Oh my God!
In the lockdown.
Oh my God! That's right.
And so what I want is just someone who recognizes that the institutions in power that are the real threat. And again, that's where my hope, and I'm reading too much into it because I'm looking for perhaps some sort of white pill there on the political side of things. Right. If Ron DeSantis could be consistent about pushing back against the blob of policy experts in DC, if I can get that one thing from him, then I'm okay with it. Again, I happily voted for Trump both times because it was a pushback against Hillary Clinton. I know there's a lot of horrible things that come with that, but that one little value there is to me worth going in the 5 minutes. That's where my perspective is on that.
Did Joe Jorgensen not inspire you? What is the deal?
Unfortunately not.
Okay. I want to ask something, a few things, because I've got all these things in my head now, but I find it interesting. You said the culture where you're at is Southern, and I think by that you mean they question federal authority and government authority by lots of measures. So I assume it was anti-mask from the start. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. Wow. Here's what I think is interesting, because
amazing
Texas, like
country,
we lifted the governor lifted his executive order, and basically no masks now, no mask mandates, 0% lockdowns, 100% capacity, everything's fine. And when the day that happened, I was getting my hair cut. I talked with it about it with my barber, and he said, what's crazy is you're going to see people in Austin fight this freedom harder than they fought being locked up and masked up. And it hit me like, oh my God, I bet we are. Well, we have seen it in Austin, not the rest of the state. Thad, if Newsom had a wild hair up his ass and tomorrow goes, all right, we're 100% free, no masks, would the culture there fight that harder than they fought being locked down?
A lot of it would. Yeah. I mean, for Tho to say something like that there was a sort of like organic, natural reflex against masks, I'm like, I live in a different country than you, brother. Like, I do. The way people think here, there's some genuine, legitimate fear, okay, which it's ignorant, but I'm not as mad at that, but there's a whole bunch, as you might imagine, of just virtue signaling. I mean, I had one of my oldest friends, he's like a 75-year-old therapist. He's born and raised in San Francisco. He became a fan of my work, but and he's like, so I kind of got him half red pilled, but on this thing, he's like, I don't understand, Thad, you're thinking about masks. Why are you so upset about masks? I said, Gene, and I went through the data. I was like, look at the states, look at the data, blah, blah. He says, yeah, but what about the importance of creating an ethic of caring? See, that's it. Yeah. It all comes down to that. It's secular Christianity. You guys get that, right? I know the Mises Institute is full of Catholics, but I'm sorry, it's true. The progressivism is secular Christianity. If you're not demonstrably sacrificing your own freedom and your own individual pleasures for the greater either God's community or the state, right? You're a bad person. You're not demonstrating an ethic of caring. You're subverting it. We must have an ethic. It's like straight out of the Bible, an ethic of caring. Even if This does no good. He even said that. He said, well, even if medically it doesn't do anything, isn't it important to show an ethic of caring? I mean, what do you do with that?
Surface level of just it's a false just a image. There's nothing below the surface to any of that. It's just like, I mean, that's what virtue signaling gets at is, hey, I type something or I put a black square on my Instagram. All right, I'm done. It's odd that the lack of depth that I see among progressives with it's just, hey, put a mask on, you care about people.
Well, but I think there's an interesting kind of parallel to it, because I think a lot of the people here, they were motivated not because they had some scientific, understanding that masks didn't work. I mean, a lot of it was kind of this cultural, Alex Jonesism, and in a great way. I mean, like when the pandemic sort of, documentary came out and like social media was strict to censor it like in 24 hours because that was Star Trek. I mean, I was having beers outside with, very successful business people, and this is all they wanted to talk about, and people that you would not sort of kind of pigeonhole like being, the worst media caricatures of Alex Jones fans, but like a lot of the pushback was I don't trust Dr. Fauci, I don't trust Bill Gates. There was this natural skepticism of this, new world order sort of narrative that has been so baked into, I think, a certain part of conservative culture. And I think that was created this defense mechanism that has paid off here. And it's interesting because, I mean, when you consider, I mean, like, that's the Q stuff and a lot of, this has been the number one boogeyman of the left media. But I think there's a lot of value in these kind of conspiracy theory. I mean, because often conspiracy theories end up being a lot more right than they're wrong. Again, the most ridiculous aspect of QAnon was the belief that someone in the deep state was actually trying to stop anything, right? And there's it's just kind of baked in here that I think is, I didn't fully appreciate the significance of it until this past year, where that was my normal reaction talking to average people who otherwise, have no idea what IEIR, the Great Barrington Declaration. This was their goal, and again, it worked here.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I hear what you're saying a lot, and there are elements within, I think it's really the American conservative personality, right? More than their politics. There's an American Republican conservative, like Buck's family personality. And I'm talking about establishment Republicans, right? That look at times like now, especially anti-authoritarian, don't they? Right? That's kind of what you're saying. And in a sort of minor way, anti-statist too, right? Because so then the question is, what is it about Anthony Fauci that turned them off? I can tell you what it is for me, what I don't like about the guy, but is it that he has a Brooklyn accent? Seriously, like, is that what gets, and that he works for the federal government? I mean, so like, in QAnon, it's like, sure, I'm glad that there's people who are like rejecting the official narrative, but that the world is run by pedophile Jewish Satanists, I believe, isn't that that's the argument? And like, I'm somebody who's called into question the age of consent laws, so they're coming from my head real quick. I mean, is that really anti-authoritarianism, or is that just anti a particular set of cultural norms? You know what I mean? I don't fully trust them. That's all I'm saying.
That's a great question for Tho.
Yeah, no, I think it definitely is kind of a narrow form of anti-establishment, thinking, in a way that they wouldn't do it per se if. I think without Trump, for example, I think that a lot of the Republican response would have been very different. I think that, because I think one of the things that draws a lot of suspicion to that sort of conservative aspect of the nation is now praising from the corporate press. And I really do think that is becoming more internalized in a way that there's this natural reaction. If MSNBC is holding this guy up as a hero, then he's probably my enemy. And I think that is, again, it's reflexive. And again, it's not a principled, strong foundation necessarily for a creating a culture of liberty per se. But hey, again, I think it can create pockets of resistance against certain bad actors. And obviously it can also be taken advantage of by other bad actors that know how to work that same exact side of things. And I think that's again, what happens on the American right, where this post-Trump movement kind of goes and who ends up taking advantage of this machine that's going to be built.
Right.
And I can really easily see this going a really bad direction, which is why I want to engage it, because I want to try to be in that fight to try to stop that.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, it's been interesting to see play out.
It comes down to who has power and sovereignty and who doesn't, right? So it's basically, do you trust these people to have power and sovereignty? And I don't. I mean, what's going to happen if some QAnon good anti-mask rebel from Florida becomes president, the day before some dudes from Yemen say get in an airplane and fly it into the White House, right? What do you think all the Trumpers are going to be for then? They're going to be for World War III is what they're going to be for.
Not
right?
if that guy getting into office is Tho Bishop.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So that's I'd much rather, again, the one hope I have is that, hopefully I think Ron DeSantis right now, like this earlier today, he pushed back, again, a perfect case of the dual sides here. In the same press conference, he's rejecting the idea of Florida cooperating with federal vaccine passports, while also at the same time criticizing the how strong medical marijuana is in the state right now. So again, both sides right there in the same press conference. But I think that rise, I think is in this anti-federal power thing is because then at that point, I don't care if the governor of Arkansas has views that I think are horrible, as long as they're standing opposed the American empire right now. I'm in favor of that. So that's why I'd be perfectly fine with. I hope DeSantis kind of just stays here and promotes a sovereign sort of view of Florida. But again, as an Ivy League trained attorney, I'm afraid that turn is not going to end up ending precisely the way I would like it to go.
So go ahead.
To answer something, I've been thinking about this as you asked it. Why do these type of people see Fauci and they hate him? One of the things I'm not a big fan of is pointing out hypocrisy in politicians, because it's so blue-pilled kind of. It's like, hey, Gavin Newsom, who knew he would go have dinner with his friends at a rich place? But I think for the average boomer conservative, they do see things like that, and the hypocrisy is what kind of red pills them almost a little bit. So you see Fauci said no masks. Hey, then he said masks. And to us, we're laughing at what a clown show, but they're thinking this guy's full of shit. He's just going to do what his advisors in this deep state or whatever are going to say. Much like I think the momentum behind the Gavin Newsom recall really ramped up after the incident at the French laundry restaurant. I saw and I thought,
created it.
Of course, he doesn't believe in this bullshit. And he's not going to do it. Shocking. But just the optics of it led so many normies. I don't even like using that term much anymore, but so many normal people going, wait a second, what a hypocrite. I want him out.
Totally. Yeah, the French laundry thing was huge. Yeah, that might have been the beginning of the recall movement, actually. Thank God for that, that we had that. And then we found out that I think exactly a week later, the mayor of San Francisco had her own party at the French Laundry without masks.
Yeah. And to us, we're probably going, well, of course they're doing that. I thank God for the person that filmed it or recorded it on their cell phone or however they had a mole in their organization. I'm glad it did get out, because to a lot of regular people that aren't thinking deeply into things, they see the hypocrisy of politicians. And I think it really does upset them seeing Fauci at the baseball game with his mask down in the chair. Just things like that, I think, slowly kind of get to boomer conservatives, and that kind of starts to slightly red pill them.
Yeah. But again, the mask compliance in San Francisco, Gavin's hometown, didn't change a jot after he was shown to not care himself about masks. The hardcore believers who actually run stuff, they didn't, the people from the universities, by the way, you guys ever understand that all of American politics right now is essentially just a civil war between people who are of universities and those who are not of universities. There's people who speak the language of universities and those who don't. The people who've been to universities, they were unaffected by the French Laundry, as far as I could tell. I mean, they still wore their masks. They still insisted that we were insane to even ask a question about the lockdowns. Didn't change at all. But there was, yes, a big middle ground, I think, who were not sure, because people don't have time to read scientific studies in JAMA like I do, every day, whatever. I think the big middle ground, I think you're right. The French Laundry did push them. I think that's why we have more than 2 million signatures on the petition. I think that's why he might very well get recalled. And that's why he's not going to be president, is because of the French Laundry. That was a big moment. And it wasn't just the hypocrisy. For me, the most important thing was they don't, as you said, they don't believe it themselves.
Yep.
They're not scared of this themselves.
Yep.
So what are we doing? I mean, like, come on. But the sheep-like quality of the cultural elite. See, that's what's so amazing, right? Remember when the cultural elite, like the people who lived in New York City and San Francisco, used to be on the cutting edge of things?
Mm-hmm.
Remember how, like, that's where Lenny Bruce used to hang out and say what you aren't supposed to say, right? Remember, like, that's where the hippies came from, right? And punk rock came from, and hip hop came from, and rebellion came from in American culture. That's where all the rebellion came from those two cities, pretty much in the whole country. Maybe LA too, right? Now it's just the opposite. Now the fucking Republican rednecks are our rebels. They're our punk rockers, which leaves me completely in the wilderness. I have no team whatsoever. I'm a complete free agent, and I think I always will be. There is no team for me. Maybe that's a good thing, but that's a complete flip in my lifetime.
Let me tell you about our newest sponsor, DomesticTerroristClothing.com. Do you want to travel by plane but still want to show your disdain for their policies? Do you live in a terrible place where masks are required everywhere, but maybe you want to make your feelings known without even saying a word? Do you want to comply while still resisting? Well, then the Obey mask is for you. These masks are 100% polyester exterior and 100% cotton interior. They are black with the word Obey in white across the front. They are not medical grade and not meant for medical use, much like all of the masks, right? They may not stop any diseases, much like all of the masks, but will certainly make all of the Karens lose their minds. If you're in one of these cities and you just got to go into these stores and they're going to make you do that, put on a mask that just pisses them off. And my guys over at DomesticTerroristClothing.com could hook you up with this. The folks at DomesticTerroristClothing.com, like many in the Liberty Movement, are concerned that about half the country are being labeled as domestic terrorists. This label is being applied to hard-working average Joes and Janes. Their goal there is to reappropriate these words, domestic terrorist, and normalize them to remove the negative connotation. They want to see their brand on people from all walks of life. So when the blue-checked, blue-pilled lefties label you a domestic terrorist, you can smile and say, yes, I am, knowing there are millions just like you. Find the fellas at DomesticTerroristClothing.com on Facebook, Twitter, Gab, and Minds. Get your items at DomesticTerroristClothing.com. Use promo code BUCK for a 10% discount on all items. Let's get back to the show.
Yes, it's funny. I'm so glad you brought this up. I tweeted this out the other night, and this was a situation I actually found myself in. I'm in a small town in Texas at an old school honky tonk festival. My wife and I are among the youngest people here, and that's by far, but in most cases, probably 200 people. Not one mask, not one.
Cheers.
And the couples at our table were talking about work ethic, God, love of each other, and alcohol. And I said, this is the new punk rock. This is subculture now. And I thought about you specifically. I thought, what does this look like for someone who's more culturally left, let's say, in the good way, not the current mask way?
Yeah.
What does that look like to you? What do you think when you realize, like, now it's rebellious to be amongst a bunch of older people talking about God, drinking alcohol, and not wearing a mask?
So, yeah, I mean, for people who know my work at all, they know that, like, foreign policy, like, bring them all home tomorrow, eliminate the defense budget by at least 90%, I mean, radical as anybody. I'm open borders, totally. Like, that's not even a question. I don't even want to know the numbers. Fuck it. Like, we have no business, no right. The God never told me that I have the right to stop people from Mexico living here because I happen to be born here, and religion. I mean, I was born an atheist. I became an agnostic. I'm not opposed to it, but I have no interest in it. The nuclear family, I think, is a terrible idea. Okay, so like that's me, right? I made myself an expert on Trumpism. By the way, I am the world's leading expert on Trumpism. How did I do that? For the last 3 months, I have watched every single day Steve Bannon's War Room. 2 hours every day, 6 days a week for the last 3 months. Okay. Nationalist populism, I now get it. Fascinating, and something to be respected. But that's what they're all about. They're all just like the people at your table, right? Mm-hmm. They talk about God, family, country, veterans, the military. They can't get enough of that stuff, right? And it's just like, that is so not me. But back to sort of what Tho is saying, like, they're also the only people in the damn country, as far as I can tell, who are rebellious against state power, who are rebellious against corporate power, corporations who are in league with the government. They're the only people in the country who use the term corporatism correctly, which is the co-management of society by government and corporations, which is and was the foundation, the economic foundation, the basis of Italian and German fascism. And they know this. They're the only people in this country who not only are anti-imperialist, they use the damn term. They are opposed to the permanent presence of the United States anywhere else in the world. They are opposed to taking over countries, all that stuff. They're not opposed to war. And I think they're even opposed to war with China, even though they're total super hawks on China. And I don't love that, but they've also opened my eyes to China a lot. I've learned a whole bunch about China from these guys. But so I'm still like stuck. Like our core values are like 180 from each other, 180 degrees apart. Like I have nothing to do with these people, but yeah, like they're the punk rockers now. Like what the fuck? Like it's not. So I'm sort of thrilled that somebody is calling. Also, by the way, they're also the only Marxists left in this country. Have you noticed that Steve Bannon uses the term working class like every other sentence?
Yeah.
And they say the Republican Party, and they're right. I bet they're right about this. The Republican Party will be the party of working class America, and they are going to be correct. And that includes non-white working class people. But they talk about class all the time. Liberals don't know about class. They forgot. They were never taught about class somehow. It's all race to them. It's all race. Bannon and company, it's all about class. It's all about the working class versus, and they use this term, the elites in government and in corporations. That's sort of like distilled pure populism, right? It's not terribly sophisticated in that form. I mean, Bannon and company make it more sophisticated, but that's, I think, what Tho's been talking about this whole time, is that populist impulse of the people, in quotes, against the elites who run the society, who are the political class, the ruling class. Marxists use the term ruling class. Guess who else does? Steve Bannon and company. Everybody should be watching that show and studying this, because that's the future of American politics. That's the present and future. Those people are not going away. They are intent on taking over the Republican Party. I now know from watching the show that they have given up on a third party. They're going whole hog to take over the Republican Party. And I don't see why they won't do it, because the establishment Republicans have no base of support. Who the hell, is there anybody who cares about Mitch McConnell? Like, is there any... or Andrew McCarthy or Lindsey Graham? Anyone like passionate about these guys? Like, they've got to go. Or Cheney, Liz Cheney. Like, is there anybody in Wyoming who's like passionate Liz Cheney supporter? Seriously? Like, it can't be. So I got to believe it's these wackadoodles like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and, actually Matt Gaetz. That dude,
Florida man.
That's my money's on him to be the president after Trump gets his second term in 2024. That guy is going to go places, and you're going to get a Trump who is like Matt Gaetz, who's like television friendly, who doesn't say stuff that makes liberals go crazy in terms of like his appearance or like his demeanor. He won't talk about pussies, etc. He won't do any of that stuff. He'll probably use the correct language around race. but he's going to have exactly the same hardcore Trump politics and policies, and they're going to be, I think, quite successful because, well, the left, I've just never seen anything like it, and the Democratic Party in particular, I've never seen anything like it. I'm 55 years old. I've always been anti-Democrat because when I was a socialist, we were anti-Democrats, right? We thought the Democrats were the problem when I was a socialist. But I've never seen the current Democratic Party. I've never seen any institution, Republican, Democrat, any in this country so corrupt and ruthless in my lifetime as the current iteration of the Democratic Party. I mean, Russiagate. Look, I mean, just alone, that alone. I mean, these people are not to be trusted at all. Like, this is why if you didn't assume that they cheated on the election, you're stupid. Like, you haven't been paying it. Like, we should have started with that assumption. I'm not saying it proves that they did it, but if they did Russiagate and then took over, and then the way that they handled the media and controlled the media during the Trump years, I mean, I've never seen anything. I've always hated the New York Times. I've never seen the New York Times be written like high school seniors, you know, trying to prove how woke they are. I mean, it's that bad. I've never seen anything like these people, like the Kamala Harrises of the world. I mean, these are just like ruthless authoritarian thugs who don't care about anything except getting elected. They change their positions on everything. The sort of the Clinton, Obama, Biden, Kamala Harris, that crew, the establishment, they squashed Bernie like in a corrupt way, right? I mean, they don't give a fuck. Like, they really don't. I mean, 1 minute they're totally against gay marriage and now they're all for it. You know, yesterday, what was the worst thing in the whole wide world that had ever been done? Kids in cages. And my God, this is a national emergency and we must run to the border and save those kids and pull them. Now, how many kids are in cages? And what are they saying? They're actually saying things. They're saying, oh, well, but look what Biden's doing with the stimulus bill. Oh, look, he's a nice guy. So actually the Republicans are using these kids in cages thing at the border as a distraction. You don't care about the kids in cages. Now we know. Thank you very much. You are so corrupt and ruthless. It's off the charts. It's off the charts. I don't know what to do with these people. They're terrifying.
So go ahead. That was a lot to parse through, but
no, but I loved it. I think one of the interesting things about Bannon, because you know, you mentioned the military at the beginning about, you know, one of the institutions that conservatives revere so deeply, right? It's kind of a core part of conservatism. I live in a very strong military town. I've got an Air Force base on the west and the east, and Navy base in the middle. And there's a lot of concern right now that the Biden administration is manipulating the military in cultural ways that they're starting to distrust, right?
Oh, I know.
And when you have Steve Cohen from Tennessee openly, you know, acting like, you know, they're concerned that military members are going to shoot Biden because it's full of, you know, white male Trump supporters. You know, that sort of you know, I think one of the interesting things that's happened particularly the past years, is the loss of faith developing for these institutions, right? Congress has been disrespected for a long time, rightfully so. The White House has been polarized on political lines. If you're guys in the White House, it's fine. If you don't, you hate them. Now the Supreme Court is being attacked for political reasons on both the left and the right, right? They're recognizing that these are not, you know, divinely wise judges, right? You know, these are a political aspect here. You have, again, the military is being questioned. I mean, I've got people that were Rick Santorum supporters back in the day, you know, out there calling for the FBI to be abolished because of its treatment of Trump, right? Not, wow. And this is fascinating to see happening. And again, the election aspect, this period of polarization, going back to COVID, this is the first time we've had a national crisis that is being viewed so differently by red and blue America, right? 9/11 was a unifying aspect, Pearl Harbor unifying, right? Typically it's a unifying aspect when you have a crisis. This is two people are seeing different realities, and there's no way to bring them together. The election, no way to bring these things together.
Yes, awesome.
And this is all exciting, but like the Bannon stuff, Bannon is basically on that cultural, the class aspect. He's basically like picking up what Rothbard was trying to do in the 90s. And that's like, if you could just get Bannon to engage with some of the 90s, like Rothbard material, you know, if Rothbard was criticizing NAFTA on you know, not quite the same grounds as Bannon, right? That, you know, there's some criticisms there even that work well. But, you know, Rothbard and Hoppe have talked about, you know, the value of class theory and understanding power versus liberty. And there's a lot here that I you know, this return to that 90s Buchanan era politics, I think is interesting. Now, of course, you know, the right in the early 2000s was the antithesis of all of this, right? I mean, that's when the right was the power culture. That's when cancel culture was coming from the Dixie Chicks and Freedom Fries and all that sort of stuff, right? So things change over time. But the fact that we're back to that sort of, a lot of that 90s era politic, because I mean, I think the best aspect of Trump is I view him as bizarro Reagan, and that both of them talked similar rhetoric, good rhetoric that can be praised, fine. Policy-wise, you know. But the difference is that Reagan got conservatives to have faith in these institutions that always hated conservative America. And Trump has revealed these people. Now Trump convinced conservatives that these institutions really hate them, including the Bush family, right? And so again, I think that there's the bannings of the world and this sort of the consequences of COVID and everything that's gone on. It creates a very unique environment. And it's quite possible. What terrifies me is not Ron DeSantis, and it's not it's someone like Mike Pompeo, who can kind of who speaks in a very powerful religious sort of way, and can perhaps be that sort of strongman leader that I don't think Ron DeSantis has in him. That would kind of that's the legacy of Trump's political this void that's happening that kind of really worries me, because I think Pompeo is a very different dude.
Yes.
And that, so again, who ends up filling that void on the right, taking advantage of this turbulence? That's what scares me.
Brilliant. I love that whole analysis. So, I'm a historian. It's been alleged that I'm a historian. And if you look at textbooks, like the standard textbooks that on U.S. history, like the U.S. history survey that is like assigned to freshmen or whatever in colleges, the chapter on the late 60s and 70s usually has a title like The Crisis of Liberalism or The Crisis of Authority. Like, I can't even tell you how many textbooks have that as the title for that chapter, for that period, basically the Nixon years. Okay. The crisis of liberalism, because what did the liberals just done? Well, they had just created the Vietnam War. Oops. Okay. So that lost a whole bunch of their base just with that, discredited a whole bunch of institutions. The universities. Oh, what happened with the universities during the Vietnam War? Turns out they were all in league with the Department of Defense and building bombs and napalm. Oh, like Berkeley right here. My parents were involved in some of the most important protests were against the Defense Department contracts with the University of California. Fantastic. Wouldn't it be nice if the left did that these days? Right? The left in the 1960s, before I get to the main argument, were for desegregation. Great idea. We're all for that, right? Ending the war in Vietnam, fabulous, right? And freedom of speech, because they weren't allowed to say those things on college campuses in the early 1960s. And that's why they had big riots at UC Berkeley here. My parents are part of, right? That was the left. Those were their main issues. Fucking great. I'd still be a leftist if that was what they were into. Anyway, meanwhile, the Democratic Party, not the left, but the Democratic Party was killing brown people by the millions, building the defense budget by the zillions, right? Creating the special ops. Green Berets were invented by John F. Kennedy, right? The whole 9 yards, right? The Great Society programs, it turned out a lot of it was just giving a whole bunch of money to gangsters. Like literally, like the Chicago gangs, the big Chicago gangs got a bunch of money directly from the federal government, right? Or they just gave a ton of money in welfare that locked people into these prisons, mostly black women, right? Basically not allowing a man to live in the house and rewarding them for having extra children, and then wondering why things are not going well in the ghetto. Oh, and we're also going to have the Democrats, the Democratic Party launched the drug war. Let me say that again. The Democratic Party launched the drug war in 1965 and the war on crime in 1965. That's Lyndon Baines Johnson, the worst president possibly ever, although you got to give it to Roosevelt, Wilson, and Truman. But man, LBJ did his damnedest to win that title. I mean, top 5 for sure, just in terms of body counts. But if you look at the domestic consequences of that, just devastating. So Nixon comes along in 1968, right? When you think all of America is just like woke-topia, right? You look out your window in like the summer of 1968 in America, you think we look left-wing now? Holy crap, man. You have like giant giant demonstrations against everything all through the mid and late 60s, right when I was born. But Nixon comes along right in the middle of that, and he's like, yeah, I don't like any of this. And by the way, George Wallace at the very same time was saying very similar shit to what Trump is saying. If it comes from Washington, I don't trust it. Right? And George Wallace won a bunch of states in the Democratic primary, right? And then Nixon won the whole damn thing. And people are like, oh my God, we must have a crisis of liberalism. But it's worse than that, guys. It's a crisis of authority because they're not believing what our professors tell us anymore. And they're voting for people who are uneducated rednecks like George Wallace and Richard Nixon. Oh my God. That's kind of what's going on now, isn't it? Right? It's a delegitimization of the central institutions in our society. Congress and the media in particular, politicians and the media in particular, and the universities, right, have taken a massive hit in their credibility among most people who don't come from those institutions. I think this is what Tho's been saying, which I think is the most important shift here and the best thing that's been happening. That's the big silver lining in all of this. Yes, I think there is a crisis of authority right now, and thank God for it.
One of the things Bannon was he coined, I believe, calls it post-persuasion America. And I call it post-fact America, but regardless, I think we're here. And so, for instance, I heard Tom Woods tell the story. He's very good with his charts on masks, and he'll remove the dates when certain things happen and say, "Hey, can you figure out when the mask mandates were lifted?" And of course, the people can't. And one guy says to him, "Hey, you didn't adjust for population size." And well, no, he did adjust for population size. Tom points it out, and then the guy's gone. So it was just the most recent example where I think, how do you convince some of these people of reality? Because they don't care about facts and figures, and it's odd. And so my thing now is, and I'm speaking at that Oregon Libertarian State Convention, and I think I want to talk about convincing people, or at least communicating with people in post-fact America. And Tho, do you have thoughts on how? I mean, because libertarians for so long, we come at people and going, "Hey, that's not reasonable," or you're not using reason. This is logic. Look at this thing I figured out. I read this economic theory. No one cares about that now.
Well, thanks. I think the one thing that I might disagree with is that the idea that this is anything new. I mean, I think that technology and that we're now saturated with information, it makes changes things a little bit on the margins. But if like Rothbard's political analysis of the late 1800s, he looks at what led to political successes and failures. He identified that really you had people voted in political tribes, groups, right? At the time, Democrats were very popular in the South, obviously because of the Civil War, with Catholics, with a lot of immigrants. And that basically the way that Democrats would have success is by appealing and activating those voters by hitting the issues that they already cared about. So there's aspects within the belief system of these large percentages of the populations. And so if politicians actually held up and stood for something that those groups cared about, then there was kind of a crowd behavior that represented itself in political behavior. So the idea that we as individuals generally process platforms and make that's true for, I think, a small percentage of the population, right? But for most people, there's something larger in their belief system pre-existing that leads to political outcomes more often than not. Now people's processes, I think, can change over time. I think that universities, for example, I think are replacing, or they install a certain sort of belief system, and you see it with the way that third generation Cuban voters in Florida vote much further left than original Cuban immigrants here in Florida, right? I think it goes back to the university system there, right? I think there's a lot of changes there, and but I think this is why what I would like to see as someone that has a preference between the two political tribes here is that if Republicans want to have any chance of stopping this momentum and winning this battle of post-persuasion of America, it must treat the university system with all the seriousness that it used to treat the border, right? The demographics is destiny sort of thing. Regardless of what your opinion on the immigration issue is, Republicans saw the border as an existential threat to their existence going forward. They have to, and again, the irony is that Hispanic voters are bailing out Republicans because they're the ones most turned off by like BLM rhetoric. They're the ones that hate the woke stuff. You know, they're the ones that don't want to be called Latinx. You know, those working class elitist divides there are huge. Hispanic voters might be the bailout of conservative America. And if they want to keep that, then they need to stop this university system that's installing that belief. And I'm interested to see, because still, in spite of all the shit talking about universities, the little woman down the road who's so proud of little Johnny and Susie because they just got accepted to Florida State, conservatives are still handing their children over to their enemy and are shocked when they hate them in 3 years, right? And so that's still kind of ingrained into, college is the pathway to success and all of the assumptions built into that. That's still there. So if you don't confront that, I think that they're going to find out that they're not going to be able to reason with their kids later to vote the way they do. And I think that might end up changing some of those demographic tribes going forward.
So, yes to all that, except not that I give a shit about the Republican Party, but like if I were them, and the universities, I would say to them, don't worry about it. The universities they're being taken care of, already. You don't have to do a damn thing. Renegade University, it's this little outfit that I know about. So we already have 1,000 members, 1,000 people who have given us money, like real money, not like $1, but like real money. Still way cheaper than Harvard, but like, that's just us. That's just one teeny tiny little sliver of the internet where you can learn everything for little to no money. You can learn everything, and you can get a far better education than at any Ivy League college, far better for little to no money, right? And this is just happening all the time, right? It's just every day, there's just millions and millions of people getting their information from sources outside the cathedral, right? And there's more people every single day. My girlfriend, when we started dating a year ago, she was like not terribly political, but like a Bay Area liberal sort of instinctively. Oh boy, try talking to her now. Like she never went to college, and she hasn't taken any college classes in the last year. Try to tell her something about COVID and the lockdowns. Good luck. She is now an expert. I mean, she could go on any show and you would think she was an epidemiologist at Stanford. She's learned it all from the internet, right? So the universities are going down. I mean, they're closing right and left. Mills College, this old women's college right here in Oakland, pretty prestigious place. They just closed their doors. And there are going to be more and more and more renegade universities. We are getting bigger like crazy right now, and there's going to be more and more of us. And so I agree with you. That's, Antonio Gramsci, the Marxist theorist, he said, right, it all begins with cultural hegemony. You establish cultural hegemony and you've got the whole thing. He was right. And so the left was like, yeah, well, let's make sure we are the ones who teach all the children.
Yes. From
K through the age 22. That we control through the teachers' unions, right? And then in colleges, we take control of the English department, the history department, political science department. And we've got this thing, and that's what they are now reaping the benefits of that strategy. Now they have AOCs in Congress. She's just exactly like my students at Barnard College and Occidental College. Exactly. I know these people but now they're in Congress. And more importantly, now they seem to be the editorial staff of the New York Times. I mean, I think they are. It's all like 25-year-old women who just came out of some groovy liberal arts college in the East Coast, like every single one of them. And they all talk the same talk. But AOC, like if you put her in front of like 8 out of 10 Americans, she may as well be speaking Albanian. They won't even know what she's talking about, right? She doesn't have a base of support. You think she could ever win the presidency? No. I mean, most of the country literally won't know what she's talking about. Much like they won't even be able to oppose her because they just won't understand it. Systemic racism. What? Huh? I mean, it's just it's nonsense. So it's falling apart. The institutions are falling apart. Just a question of how fast. And so everyone listening, go on the internet, go on Twitter, learn your stuff, go watch YouTube, and if you have the means at all, start a podcast. Write a blog. Participate in. You can create news with us, right? We have the most massive, magnificent set of news organizations in the history of the world right now, by far, right? But they're not corporations. They're just people for the most part, or they're small corporations like Renegade University, right? That don't have power over anybody, right? It's immense. When I was growing up in the 1970s and 1980s, you guys know this, right? The FCC made it impossible for anyone to have a license in radio or TV. So we got to watch. Your choice was Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, or Peter Jennings telling you the same thing. That was your nightly choice. That was it, right? And then PBS with a slightly more liberal and slightly more educated. Same take, though. Now we live in a galaxy. It's an infinite galaxy of information that's at everyone's fingertips. If you work in a gas station in Alabama, you have access to every piece of information for free immediately. That's it. And it's happening. It's happening. This is one of the major reasons we have a breakdown in the institutions. Maybe it's the reason. So white pill. There you go.
That was a
white pill.
Yeah, that was a good white pill. So you have any, we'll close this up. You have any advice or just a beautiful white pill like that just gave us?
No, I agree with everything that just said right there. And of course, Mises University is another great option
there you
out
go.
there if you're looking for some alternatives.
Yeah, there you go.
And again, the breakdown of that manufacturing of consent with that control over the press that they had, in the 20th century. I mean, this is why they're going after Glenn Greenwald and Substack, right? And this is why they're going to try everything they can to shut down, all these decentralized outlets. I only say though, I just imagine though, if we weren't directly subsidizing still so many of these universities, because what concerns me is that particularly with, let's say we have a bad economic crash very soon. You have people that are idle, they aren't working, et cetera. When you still have student loan programs that are allowing people to take off 4 years and pursue a degree within these institutions, that's where I still think you're gonna have a lot of people parked in there. And so while I'm very excited about the ecosystem that's being built for these alternative institutions, and I think that the understanding of the need to build these parallel bodies are so important, there's great momentum there. Anything we can do to just take out these funding mechanisms that are subsidizing the enemy class right now, that's, and the great thing is that, again, if you are on, again, the political right, much more interested in this side than a lot of the others, but this is something that can be done at the federal, state, and local level. And I think you need an enemy to wield power against. And I'd much rather it be focused that way than against some other areas that conservatives can find to hit against. And so that's why I'm hoping that some of this, the Bannon rhetoric is taken seriously and translated to policy in ways that it's certainly not going to get from Congress. I mean, the Republicans in DC are so out of touch with your average voter. But that's where, again, some of this DeSantis bold Florida man sort of energy, if other Republican state leaders follow that approach and start trying to fund universities, sort of push back against the federal vaccine passport, that sort of stuff, then again, I think that it can help push along this process that we're already seeing for all the reasons that I just mentioned. So that's kind of my focus there.
Real quick, I am 100% for, ending the federal student loan program, of course, and all the subsidies that universities get from the government, of course. But we don't even need that. I mean, that would make it faster, but we don't need that. You know what? We have dozens and dozens and dozens of people at Renegade University whose email addresses end in .edu.
There you go.
And many of them are at places like Brown University and Columbia University and University of California, Berkeley, and colleges all over the country. Oh, we also have several professors, some of whom even teach for us. And more are going to be teaching for us soon. I have about half a dozen professors at major established universities who can't wait to teach for Renegade University, right? And so that's great for us. But the more important thing is, what are they doing? Then they go back into their universities with these terrible, horrendous, revolutionary ideas and change the ballgame from within. So we're going to have our own agents. We already have our own agents inside the Citadel, inside the Cathedral, and that's just going to increase. Or just people who watch YouTube, more than you're supposed to. coming back to their Yale seminars and being like, this doesn't comport at all with all this data I just saw in this YouTube video, right? That's already happening. There's already fights coming on. That's why they're trying to censor us. That's why they're using the tech companies to censor all of us who are saying the wrong thing. So, but white pill again.
Yeah, it is. All right. We got to get you guys both to plug away. So Bishop, while you and I are going to be in an event coming up soon, plug away on anything you'd like.
Yes. Well, we just put up a new video on socialism for our economics and beginners class at Mises.org. You can find all those videos at begineconomics.com. And you can find me on Twitter at ThoBishop, THOBISHOP.
And talk about that event in Birmingham.
Yeah, so we got an event going on in Birmingham about the consequences of COVID in the economy. And then we're going to have a little session about political strategy going forward after all the events of 2020. So I think it's going to be an exciting event. Brewery down in Birmingham, Alabama, Avondale, and going to be a fun time. No mask.
Awesome.
No mask, of course. Thaddeus Russell, plug away. You got all kinds of stuff happening at Renegade.
Yeah, lots of stuff. Well, so for those who don't know me, the Unregistered podcast is weekly, but Renegade University has 3 courses going on right now that everyone should know about. We got 2 that are coming up. One is an introduction to cryptocurrency taught by Vin Armani. That's filling up fast. I don't think we're going to put a cap on it though, so you can get your tickets, but it is filling up fast. And then just today I put on sale, I'm teaching the Great Books series, which I taught at Columbia, actually, from Plato to Aristotle to Nietzsche to Marx, all the rest. It's the most fun thing I've ever taught in my life. I'm teaching it at Renegade University now. We're starting with Plato's Republic. It's a webinar starting in a month and a half. Go to renegadeuniversity.com to sign up for these things. And then it's going on right now, but you can watch the video course when it's done. We broke the internet with this course. It's called Make Your Own Guns, a guide to 3D printed firearms. And we sold that out. It's our first webinar to sell out. And it's been amazing. People are making guns with the RU logo on the grip, etc. It's very exciting, but you can sign up for that course and watch the whole thing. It's taught by Control Pugh, who is famous in the 3D gun world. Everybody in that world knows him, and he's an incredible teacher. So if you're interested in 3D printed guns, get that course and watch it. Crypto, same thing. And if you're interested in ancient Greek philosophy, come study with me, The Republic, arguably the most important book other than the Bible in Western civilization. Mm-hmm. There you go.
You allowed to talk about any live events yet coming up later in the year?
Well, sir, I guess we can. Yeah, we're just, I can't give you a date because you and I and other people need to have a meeting, but we're going to have Renegade University weekend in Texas, almost definitely in October. We're pretty sure about which date, but I don't want to say which yet until we're 100%. But by this week, we will know, and it will be on sale. I can tell you this. The lineup is crazy. The guests who are coming are Hotep Jesus, Cody Wilson, Scott Horton, Deirdre McCluskey, and Jack of the Perfume Nationalist podcast. Completely crazy, off the chain. It's going to be the biggest weekend. It's going to be at Buck Johnson's house in Lockhart, which is the barbecue capital of Texas, so deemed by the Texas state legislature. So it's real. Mm-hmm. This is going to be the most fun for my whole year. No doubt about it. It's going to be such a blast. So that'll be on sale real soon. Just hang out at renegadeuniversity.com and you'll see the announcement soon.
Excellent. I'll link to everything that you guys both announced on the show notes page for this bonus episode. Thaddeus Russell, Tho Bishop. Wonderful names, wonderful guests. Thank you guys.
It was a blast. I needed this. Thank you.
I told you that was going to be a great discussion, and I think it really was. What a wonderful chat that was. When we were done and I was done recording, Thaddeus had said, I wasn't having the best day. And then we had this discussion and now I'm all fired up. And I think that Tho Bishop Florida man energy translated, it transferred, I should say, right through the Zoom session that we just had. Speaking of that, we do these on Zoom and I keep telling you now about the YouTube channel because I was very bad at doing that before. So all of these, including this one, will be on YouTube. You just, you know how to use YouTube. You're a grown adult. type in Counterflow with Buck Johnson. You'll find the channel on there. All of these have video as well. If you prefer that method, you can see Tho's badass Miami Dolphins hat, and you'll see Thaddeus and myself as well. And what else do I have to promote? That's about it. Follow me on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. Find us in the Telegram group. Get that Telegram app, Counterflow with Buck Johnson. And this has been a bonus episode of the Counterflow podcast. See you guys soon.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.
This has been the Counterflow Podcast, a part of the